I had believed up until this morning that signatures were small, secret anchors. They made the world obedient. You signed, someone else filed the stamp. The ledger accepted the small miracle of agreement, and the day behaved. I have since learned that signatures can be cowardly, can be adventurous, can be rewritten by a smudge that likes to wear suits. The slip answered me. It did not materialize with thunder or a chord from a celestial organ. It replied in the office's everyday noises, an inked stamp that sounded like laughter, a clock that hiccuped and then began to sing its seconds backwards. We were in the middle of restamping an entire Petty Cities Monday when the lights started to shimmer, as if someone had turned the world's film speed down, and then gently jerked it back up. Paper alerted us the way a bird alerts you to a storm, small, sharp rustles. Their Owen said, pointing at the lobby clock as if pointing could stop time from being mischievous. That's new. The clock did not look new. It looked like an old acquaintance who had decided to show up with a new hat. The hands ticked, then twitched, then, to everyone's polite horror, unwound themselves like threads pulled free. Me's. Ledger, whose hands are never more than 3 inches from an official stamp, did not flinch. For a moment, as someone younger than she ought to be emerged from the elevator rims. Ledger 50 going on 30, hair less a crown than a rebellious hedgerow, everything else in me wanted to be reduced to a syllabus. We are good at this, she said, as if being reduced temporarily in age were a paragraph chief among many. We have hedges for that, the younger me's. Ledger moved with a briskness that made an old page of regulations seem like a comfortable blanket. I watched her count the paperclips on her desk, as she always does when she is threatened, then notice me. Her eyes, those ledger-stitched eyes, narrowed into the expression she uses when she must be both severe and mothering at once. August Finch, she said. Explain. Explain is a tall word to use against a smudge in a suit, but I tried. I told the narrow story, Form 42B misplaced, Tuesday tumbled into last Thursday, sandwiches developing autobiographies, the lobster-hatted mayor. I said sorry in 6 different bureaucratic cadences, and then, because it's my default, hummed the filing room jingle until the humming became an odd kind of argument in itself. This is the slip's work, Ms. Ledger said after a small pause that felt somehow like a footnote leading a sentence. It is not hostile, Mr. Finch. It is inconvenient and persuasive. Persuasive how? Owen asked, tipping a stapler like a conductor's baton. I did not have to ask. The building answered. At the far end of the open plan floor, a flyer that had read Annual Paperclip Audit unfolded itself into an elegy and then rewrote its own sign-off. The words rearranged on the page like skittish birds. With regards became always with a flourish, and then devolved into a punctuation stamp that pinged like a tiny bell. Amy reached for it and her fingers hesitated, as if some private memory was playing hide and seek beneath her skin. I don't remember filing that, she said. Her voice was small. It was the voice of someone who could remember the exact angle of a stamp, but not whether a week had had a middle, and there it was, temporal erosion. The slip was not only rewriting paper, it was nudging identities. Retired officials, people whose calendars had a nice, respectable tombstone staggered back into the corridors as younger selves, mismatched to current hairstyles and old grievances. The chief archivist, Harmon Vance, appeared from the vault hall with spectacles thicker than ever, and then, on the next pass, with cherubic cheeks and the look of a field agent who'd just been assigned a new day. The office made a sound like an audience unsure whether to laugh. You will understand, if you have ever worked in the particular petratory we call a bureau, how fragile the things of authority are. A signature is not just ink. It is a promise that someone will remember what they promised. When the promised person walks in wearing a younger face and refuses, in the softest way, to keep the promise, the signature becomes existentially fragile. It blinks. We need to refile signatures, Ms. Ledger said, and it sounded like someone dropping a book on a table to make a point. We need witnesses and witnesses for the witnesses. Registrar Amy, who processes requisitions with both hands and a small, private smile, was suddenly absent the way a middle vanishes from a phrase. We kept trying to hand her corrected forms, and she put them down gently, scanning them as if something inside the paper might bite. Her eyes found mine once, and in that small gaze there was an accusation I could not interpret. Do you want me to be steady because you need me to be, or because I always was? Meanwhile, the slip had the grace to be articulate. It did not hiss, it wrote. Dot, who favors ellipses and pastries, darted up to a loose corner of a memo and left an ellipsis like a breadcrumb. The ink around it rippled. The smudge consolidated into a presence that smelled faintly of erasers and seaside gulls, two things a smudge should never smell like. You say I am a mistake, it punctuated more ink than voice. You call me misfiled. I call myself a necessary punctuation, Owen snorted. Don't tell me you have opinions on grammar. He looked at me, and in the look I saw the appeal of his life. To make jokes until someone made the world behave. Listen, he said, tugging one corner of a requisition so hard it hummed, we can laugh this into submission. The slip punctuation, smudge, argument rippled. You laugh, it replied, because laughing tightens your belts. I loosen them. It was, at first, surprisingly reasonable. It conjured images of people's lives smoothed into bland calendars, no missed birthdays, no astonishments, no odd meetings that lead to marriages or to songs. Is that what you want your children to inherit? It asked, said with the sideways pity of a boot that has seen the weather for a decade. The automation faction liked the idea of never being surprised. One of them, an earnest man who kept a clean row of stamps in his desk, drawer pushed forward with rhetoric about efficiency and risk profiles. He proposed a mechanized erasure device, a blunt instrument that would excise the slip's influence by smoothing the margins, flattening the folds, and rendering all punctuation into obedient periods. No, Miss Ledger said. The one-syllable sound landed like a rule. No, she did not explain at first. That would come later, perhaps like a footnote that rewrites the whole page. She was more practical. We refile signatures. We call witnesses. We do not mechanize our souls. Owen turned to me, with that odd mixture of warmth and exasperation that he wears like a scarf. August, he said, paper is thinner than we think. So are we. Staple where you can, sing where you must. We began to work like a chorus of tired librarians. Desk lamps hummed into battle. Harmon Vance shuffled in and out like a judge who relocates mid-trial, thin hands carrying a key that thrummed faintly. He suggested ceremonial things, a signature loop that would compel consent even if the consenting person was temporarily unmoored. You manufacture consent with kindness, he intoned, which is a bureaucratic way of saying you make people want to sign what they sign. In the meantime, the slip mocked us by rewinding personal grievances. An old report came loose from a binder and unspooled like a film. Inside it was a memory of a younger Mies Ledger, not stern but mischievous, and a regulation she had once bent to save a village fair. The paper's edges shimmered with that same old choice, rule or kindness. Amy hovered at the refiling table, hands trembling slightly. Her usual calm was marred by the sense that her week had been partly stolen. If I sign now, she said, looking at me like a hydrant that had been left on too long, will I remember signing later? I wanted to say yes. I wanted to give her the simple, clean answer that would make us all breathe. But the world would not allow me that lie. You will remember what you need to remember, I confessed, and maybe what you don't. She smiled thin, a stamp pressed without pressure, and signed the form. Her signature looked like a promise and a question stitched together. The paper hummed and, for a minute, murmured like a placid pool in which small fish made polite ripples. That lull was ripped apart by the slip's next action. It is not content with minimal chaos, it is theatrical. It took a memo full of assurances and oath to standard procedure, and made the language flirt with possibility. Clauses began to offer alternatives like branches of a street sign. Suddenly emails that had already been sent came back with new subject lines. Coffee arrived before the order was placed. An intern greeted their retired supervisor like a neighbor bumping into himself in a past life. The office became top-heavy with ideas that had not yet been agreed upon. Romance, which is a precarious bureaucracy of its own, did not survive this reworking unscathed. The small thing between me and Amy an afternoon shared over misfiled forms, a sandwich traded with nervous hands stuttered. There was a middle week in which our shared joke about her penchant for stamps was perhaps unwritten. She looked at me across a sea of forms, and I felt like a clerk at a memorial. The H of a thing that might be amputated for the sake of consistency. "Do you think we'd be better off with no surprises?" Amy asked, not in political terms, but in the tiny personal grammar of our shared convalescence. "No," I said. The answer was honest, but I think we have to choose which surprises to keep. The slip, overhearing, unwrapped itself like a present. It loved the debate because debate is attention, and attention is a kind of weather it could live on. It offered me an image that wrapped around my chest, a childhood in which schedules never bent, in which my mother's lists were never amended, and every arrival and departure executed with mechanical kindness. "Wouldn't you like that piece?" it asked. I thought of my mother copying family memories into neat boxes. I thought of the ledger of my childhood, each page immaculately labeled, and I did feel the siren of that smoothness. It appealed to the part of me that fears error enough to catalogue it. It appealed dangerously. Owen saw the flash in my face and jerked the stapler like a priest calling time. "Don't be tempted, Finch," he said. "The slip sells tranquility at the price of story." "Then buy it for me," I wanted to say. Buy me an unscheduled week and every little mischief that taught me how to be brave. Instead, I did the hard middle thing. I refiled another signature, called Harmon in with his thrumming key, and we re-established continuity for half the city's week. We did not mechanize anything. We did not flay the margins. We argued, we begged, we used stamps like prayers. But the slip kept replying. Every time we closed a loop, it offered us a narrower, kinder universe in exchange. It tempted us with a calendar that makes good things repeat reliably and bad things vanish politely. It tempted Amy with the memory of our moment intact and unambiguous, without the precariousness of a week that might choose to forget the middle. It tempted me with perfection. At one point it manifested near the coffee machine, a dark smear with a gentlemanly cough. It offered a last argument before noon. "You fear chaos because you are not yet old enough to appreciate surprise," it said. "We are corrective as much as you are. We offer balance. Why insist on an ordered world when errors make for a better dinner party?" I could not answer with rhetoric. I could answer with a stapler and a signature and a decision. We scrabbled then, like archivists in a play about eternity. Dot darted between our knees, leaving marginalia that tasted like cinnamon and optimism. Harmon turned his key and the vault hummed sympathetic chords. Me's. Ledger stamped like a judge making music. Registrar Amy signed with a hand steadier than I expected. Owen jammed an old tie into a ledger as a talisman, half charm, half ritual. All of it in the end was not a mechanical trap, but a moral negotiation. We did not seek to exterminate the slip. Perhaps we had learned that hunting a smudge with a meat cleaver would leave a smear. Instead we negotiated, "You may keep some small, life-affirming misfiles. We will reclaim the days that allow people to show up to their own obligations." We spoke in signatures and in the softer language of choosing what delights we would allow. The slip remarkably listened. It was not defeated. It was mollified. It left breadcrumbs of erasure, but not the full feast of chaos it could have offered. It retreated to the margins with a sigh like a dry inked pen, leaving the memos a little wry and the clocks a little embarrassed. It did not vanish. It only promised to be less greedy for the lunch hour. We came out of it breathless, sanctified by stamps. The office tasted of toner and the faint sweetness of pastry crumbs Dot had left like altar offerings. Amy and I exchanged a look that was both apology and promise. Me's. Ledger adjusted the crease of her worry and did a thing that made me trust her more. she let herself smile, a small and precise bending of her face into something like warmth. We had not yet made our full choice. The noon train was still barreling toward us. The slip had retreated but not relinquished its appetite. We had patched a dozen loose ends, but the city still trembled in small ways. A mayor with a lobster hat was still curiously effective at ribbon cutting, and someone had petitioned to legalize the practice in certain ceremonial circumstances. The automation faction had not been swatted. It had merely been momentarily shamed into silence, as we prepared our signatures for the next round, Ms. Ledger bent toward me with an expression that is reserved for things that must be said quietly, the ones that are not on any form, because their ink would be messy. "Mr. Finch," she said, and there was a Ledger's heft in the name, "we will have to choose what to sign away. And we will have to accept that some things cannot be put back in frames without losing their light." Her words landed like a book placed flat on a desk. It is a simple thing to say choose what to sign away, but it is a heavy ledger because choosing implies losing. The building hummed around us, and in the break room, through a door that smelled of soup and cinnamon, Mabel was ladling slow, thick broth into a bowl that seemed to hum with possibilities. We had, in that accident-prone morning, managed to convince the slip to pause its appetite. But the slip had a habit of retorting in whispers. It left us with a question that would not be answered by stamps alone: which delightful errors shall we keep? And which must we refile for the continued sanity of a populace who does not enjoy surprise while folding underwear? The noon chime was no longer far. Our signatures were stacked and waiting, each a small battalion of consent. Beyond the humming vault and the smells of toner, I could hear the faint clink of Mabel's ladle. Mies. Ledger inhaled, and for the first time all day, allowed herself a memory-long smile that I did not yet understand. "Come," she said, "before the soup decides our answers for us." And I, ink-stained and anxious and oddly exhilarated, followed her down the corridor. The slip watched from the margins, a smudge that had learned the art of conversation. It had won arguments and lost others. It had made us laugh and made us tremble. It had given me the image of a life without surprise and, more importantly, the conviction that I could not trade our messy humanity for a neat, silent calendar. The next round of signatures waited like a jury. We would take them. We would also, in a quiet and perhaps unofficial annexed folder, write a list of the errors we could be permitted to keep. It would be the bearer's own catalogue of small rebellions. The slip grinned in punctuation. It replied once more, in a voice that was less a threat than a promise: "We shall bargain." I looked down at my hand. It was smudged with toner and hope. I folded my fingers into a fist and felt the texture of the day, stapled, stamped, a little dented, and still too bright to be wholly practical. I made a silent vow, bureaucratic, not romantic, that whatever happened next, I would not allow perfection to buy my memories. We had bargaining ahead, and I had to stop humming the filing jingle because it made me sound like a lunatic. Mies. Ledger opened the break room door, and a warm, savory scent hit us like a verdict. Lunchtime, a deadline, a ritual, a small god rolled toward us, and with it the choice that would decide whether a city kept its lobster-hatted mayor, and whether someone I cared about lost the middle of a week. The hook was a simple, bureaucratic sort: signatures ready, soup waiting, the slip still speaking from the margins. We would sign, we would eat, we would choose. And someone, probably me, would have to decide, carefully and with a stamp and a breath, which of the day's misfiles were errors to be corrected, and which were gifts refusing to be filed away. We moved as a team toward the break room, each step an argument and an offering. The building smelled of toner and distant thunder, and under it all was the warm, sensible aroma of stew. The slip replied at last in a punctuation that sounded almost like applause. I did not expect confessions to smell like soup. It is an odd thing to learn the texture of a person's regret, the small, scratched-in handwriting of it, while a ladle swings steam into your face. but the Bureau of Impossible Coincidences has a way of making intimate things public. We staple secrets into reports. We file apologies under maybe. We whisper offenses into the linings of our coats and expect the fabric to hold them until the right signature arrives. So perhaps it should not have surprised me that, on a day when reality fumbled its shoes and the mayor's hat had the decency to become a lobster, the antidote to arid procedure would arrive in a chipped bowl. I found myself in the break room, because that was where one went when everything else was misbehaving. The break room is, in happier times, a small universe, an actual coffee ring of a separate world lodged under a chipped teacup. On this morning it smelled like toner and cinnamon and a kind of distant thunder, the Weather Channel murmur you hear when someone in records forgets to close a window. Mabel stood behind her counter like a small, unbothered planet, ladle swinging and steam making halos over her flour-dusted sleeves. Before I knew it, a bowl had been placed in front of me, without me remembering to ask. That is another thing about the Bureau. Things are done for you when they know you will be too busy being anxious to ask. "Eat," Mabel said. Her voice was steady and blunt. "You look like someone who will forget to feed himself until irony takes the last bite." She did not look surprised at the lobster in the mayor's hat. She only looked mildly disappointed at the menu planning team and moved on. Mies. Ledger was there, perched on a chair with her ledger stitched into the elbow of her coat. She always seemed a little like a person who contained a building in her spine. Her eyes had that ledger stare and arithmetic patience that measured time in footnotes. But she was slightly less composed than usual. There are tells you learn about people who have dealt with reality for a living, M's. Ledger's tell is that she fingers the edge of a form until the paper becomes the rhythm of her breath. Today, the paper trembled. "August," she said, as if that explained anything. I don't think she'd ever use my full name when she meant to soften me. There was a small dish of bread beside her. I don't think she likes bread. She ate it the way someone eats a small, forbidden anecdote. She told a story while Mabel spooned soup-like punctuation into the bowls. It was not the sort of confession that sought absolution so much as it sought company. It was a story she had kept folded in neat corners, not unlike the little ledger tucked into the secret pocket of her coat. Once, she said, there was a regulation about weather parades. It required, in bold, that the forecast be filed 48 hours in advance and stamped in 2 colors. The festival organizers did it just so, but one year the printers failed. The clouds came early. People had brought kites. Children had spent their allowances on tickets to a band. The regulation did not permit improvisation. She paused, and I heard the paper in her hand take a breath. "I know how it sounds," she said. "A ledger should not give out except on paper. Rules are for binding. But I also know how a town looks when the parade is cancelled. So I signed anyway. I wrote a postscript, tucked it between the lines. I used a red pencil where red was strictly forbidden. Her fingers pressed the ledger like a heart. We got lucky. The printer mended, the clouds behaved, and the band played a measure off key that became the town's favorite memory. No permanent damage. But a regulation was breached. I carried that breach like a pebble in my shoe for years. Only later did I realize that pebble had become a step. I could see, in the creases around her eyes, how the pebble had polished something that resembled amusement. Mies. Ledger is not a woman who tells tall tales. She is a woman who measures risk in margins. For her to tell this one, in the middle of an office that stamps reality like bread, was to hand me an invitation, join me in the gray between the lines. I asked the automatic, of course, weren't you afraid? Law, procedure, the code. I asked it like a child who has been reading the rule book with knuckles because the book is heavier than it looks. She smiled, the sort of expression that can flatten a pile of forms, of course. I could have been fired, or worse, reassigned to the department of standardized size. But sometimes the cost of rigid continuity is small joys. I learned to count those too. That was when Harmon found us. He arrived like a long sentence of bureaucracy, precise, inevitable, and somehow softer than his title suggested. He had his vault key clicking like a metronome. Harmon looks like an argument written in handwriting, a tall man with spectacles that make his eyes look like stamped seals. He did not beat around any metaphors. Perfection exacts a tax, he said. Everyone thinks continuity costs someone nothing, but it costs us things. It costs the oddity in a postcard. It costs the blunt, accidental kindness of an unsanctioned parade. So what you are saying, I ventured, is that perfect continuity erases small kindnesses. It does, he said. Because continuity is not merely about sequence. It is also about what we decide to keep on the shelves of time. If we keep only what is neat, then the world becomes neat. Neatness has its virtues, but it also eats warmth. That was startling, because Harmon is the sort of man who usually phrases things in clauses and caveats. For him to talk about warmth in a building of file cabinets felt like a smudge in a margin, unexpected and therefore perhaps true. Isn't that why we exist? I said, the question tumbling out of me while the spoon in my hand clinked against ceramic. To keep sequence, to protect continuity. Yes, he said, but to protect it from wholesale destruction, not from the occasional, human, beneficial mistake. That is the balance. We have been saying the same thing for decades without naming it. We all listened to Mabel Ladle. Her soup was thick enough to drag a spoon through and light enough to forget on your tongue. It smelled like the kind of rain you remember when you are trying to forget other things. She put down the ladle and looked at each of us like an auditor who also had a small, private bakery. You are all very clever with stamps, she said. But cleverness doesn't always mean kindness. Some mistakes are gifts. Do not throw them away because they are messy. It was not a prophecy dressed up in pomp. It was a sentence said in the cadence of someone who has fed people through storms, blunt, unadorned, true. The phrase lodged in the back of my throat like an unpaid stamp. Owen took a long pull of his coffee. That man has a permanent habit of turning confession into quip, which makes it easier to hear the truth. He chewed the corner of his mouth, and then gave me a look I recognized from the time he had stapled a poem into a filing cabinet for reasons he said were archival romanticism. I have been lying, he said, and he did not make it a joke. The room quieted because Owen's confessions are rare and often more theatrical than this. He pulled from his inside coat an old folder that looked like it might have been stitched from memory and placed it between us like a relic. This file is an ugly little thing, he said. It smells like sable ink and a story that would not be polite in a meeting. It documents a woman who refused to let her son's memory be corrected out of existence. The Bureau's rules said we ought to tidy the error, make it go away. But she would come by and read from the file like it was a sacrament. She smelled like citrus and rain. The file made her son alive for the space of an afternoon. I couldn't sign that away, so I moved it here. Out of sequence, in a drawer the policy manuals forgot existed. He looked at each of us, and for the first time I saw something close to fear crease his face. I'm not proud. But sometimes the moral thing is not the procedural thing. I have kept this file because losing it would have meant erasing more than an error. It would have erased someone who loved in a way rules could not measure. None of what Owen said was new. People keep things out of file cabinets, out of history's harsh light. But hearing him say that he had chosen the story over the rule felt like someone handing me a key that was not authorized but somehow necessary. I thought of my own little catalogue of apologies written on sticky notes and filed under maybe. I thought of the sandwich that remembered being someone else, and the lobster mayor who seemed to do civic diplomacy better than elected officials sometimes did. Dot, who had been preening in a napkin like a small confetti of paper, hopped up onto the stack of marginalia and started to explain itself. Dot doesn't talk well in sentences. Dot does ellipses, the way a pencil trails off in someone's hand, ink spilled. Budget meeting, stamp curious, created me. It murmured, picking at a pastry crust with fingers the color of old receipts. I ate the margins, left notes, found crumbs help. It chewed and then added, I can do more than eat. I can write margins that anchor. I like crumbs, yes, but the crumbs can be used. I will help, not just for pastry this time. The way it said help was not a bargain. It was a small, papery vow. Registrar Amy bustled in then, as if the universe had timed her entrance to coincide with revelations. She had a small stamp in her hand and a look like a person who enjoyed being useful. I finished the emergency requisitions, she said. They are stamped, alphabetized, and mildly sassy. She grinned, which is what Amy does when she is about to skip the rules in favor of efficiency that feels like charity. All of this, the confessions, the soup, the ellipses did something carefully bureaucratic and wildly human. It shifted a ledger, Mies. Ledger, who counts paperclips when nervous, softened a crease in her worry. Harmon, who likes continuity the way other people like hobbies, said aloud that perhaps they had been insisting on perfect continuity because no one had taught them how to treat exceptions like treasures instead of errors. The conversations that followed were less like a meeting and more an extemporaneous prayer. We talked about taxonomy, what errors to keep, on what grounds. We discussed the criteria not in policy speak but in human words. Does it bring joy? Does it harm? Is it small and accidental or large and corrosive? Does it preserve the memory of someone who would otherwise vanish? Could it be catalogued without letting chaos sip through the margins? I felt my old instincts, my upbringing of tidy schedules, my degree in library systems push back. Rules are comforting. You can sleep with them under your pillow. But Mies, Ledger had just shown me the opposite argument. Rules are homely until they are cruel. Harmon had shown me that perfect sequence can cost oddities that make life endurable. Owen had shown me what it looks like to keep a small person alive for an afternoon in a file folder. Dot had promised to anchor margins. Mabel had given us the plain language of a prophet, ladle first. After soup, we lingered over cups of tea and the kind of silence you get when a team recalibrates its moral compass. We compiled a small, provisional list of humane errors, an official-looking title we put on a post-it and stuck under a jar of paperclips. It was the most bureaucratic rebellion I had ever participated in, cobbling tenderness into a checklist. We will not make a habit of avoiding procedure for whimsy, Mies. Ledger said, voice steady and sharp. But we will make room for those errors that carry a human weight the rules cannot measure. We will write them down. We will sign them in red pencil and place them in a special folder. It felt ceremonious and necessary in the way a bandage is necessary for a small cut. The bandage does not mean you welcome all cuts. It means you treat some with care. Owen, at one point, took the old folder from his coat and passed it around. Each of us touched the grit of its cover like an offering. If we are doing this, he said, I will commit. I'll stop hiding and I'll try to rehabilitate what I hoarded so it is not unsorted sorrow but a designated kind of mercy. Dot promised, with a fringe of coffee stain halo, to write anchoring marginalia that would act like little mooring ropes for the things we wished to keep. Harmon promised to argue for the exemption at the next review. Registrar Amy promised to invent a stamp with just enough irony to make signatures look humane. Mies. Ledger promised most dangerously to sign the red pencil where her hand had trembled before, and me. I promised to stop apologizing to staplers as practice and to direct that nervous energy into proper signatures. I promised, in my own small way, to trust that the world needed to be neat at times and messy at other times, not because of anarchy, but because of mercy. We left the break room feeling steadier, oddly fortified by soup and confessions. It was a temporary armistice. The misfile was not fixed. The slip was still a smudge in its suit. The mayor's lobster was probably giving better speeches than some committee chairs. But the change was real. We had decided to treat some misfiles as treasures, and that decision felt like choosing to anchor a boat to a buoy instead of a harbor wall. Tomorrow we try again, Owen said as we gathered our things. His voice had the light quality of someone who had chosen to act rather than hide. We set a trap, but with limits. We will close most of the leaks and leave the fine ones that make life softer. Ms. Ledger closed her ledger with the finality of a gavel. We sign at dawn, she said. And we pray if you think praying is for amateurs. Harmon clicked his vault key like a metronome and nodded. I will authorize the exception on paper, if not in spirit. We will not be reckless. Dot hopped onto my shoulder and left a tiny margin note that read, in a script of ellipses, "For crumbs and kindness." I left the room with my hands full of stamped resolve and an unshakable feeling that the next attempt would be both more possible and more dangerous than before. The slip, wherever it was nestled in a smudge of erased ink, grazing the edges of a letterhead, would not be pleased. It liked misalignment for the art of it. We were about to offer it a bargain built of signatures and soup, of stubbornness and tenderness. Outside, the hallway clocks ticked in a chorus, as if the building itself were holding its breath. Lunch was coming, and with it a noon full of decisions. The staplers at my desk hummed softly, waiting to be chosen for sacrificial duty, should any be willing. I sat down, smoothed the page of my notebook, and wrote 3 things at the top: red pencil, humane errors list, and, in my smaller, steadier handwriting, do not apologize to staplers unless they apologize back. The trap would be set, the slip would be tempted. I had a bowl of Mabel's soup in my stomach and a pebble of Mies Ledger's courage under my shoe, and the strange, necessary conviction that sometimes a bureau must learn to be human in order to protect the human things it was meant to shelter. We had agreed on almost everything. We had not agreed on the price. The building's lamps hummed as if to underscore that last sentence. I folded my hands and waited. Outside, in a city that had not yet decided if the lobster mayor was a novelty or an asset, a band tuned up and hit a single off-key chord that made someone somewhere laugh like relief. It sounded like permission. When noon came tomorrow, the slip would find us ready. The question was not whether we would staple and sign. The question was what we would decide to keep.